beneath the shadow of the guillotine, as the sun rose over a blood-stained Paris in the tumultuous year of 1792, during the fiery throes of the French Revolution, a horrifying act of brutality unfolded that would forever stain the pages of history. Marie-Thérèse Louise of Savoy, the Princess of Lamballe, a close confidant and intimate friend of the doomed Queen Marie Antoinette, faced a fate so gruesome that it echoed the darkest depths of human depravity. Born into the opulence of the House of Savoy in 1749, the Princess of Lamballe was thrust into the turbulent tides of French politics through her marriage to Louis Alexandre de Bourbon, Prince of Lamballe, at the age of 17. Navigating the treacherous waters of the royal court, the princess's loyalty to the Queen drew her to the Tuileries Palace, a grand symbol of royal excess, which became a prison for the royal family during the Revolution. On that fateful day in September 1792, an enraged mob, their hearts hardened by the ravages of inequality and injustice, tore through the streets of Paris with a bloodlust that knew no bounds. The princess, whose only crime was her unwavering loyalty to Marie Antoinette, was brutally murdered, her body subjected to unspeakable acts of violence. Her severed head, grotesquely paraded on a pike through the streets, was taken to the window of Marie Antoinette in the temple in a monstrous display of revolutionary justice. The Reign of Terror, overseen by the Committee of Public Safety, led by figures such as Maximilien Robespierre and Georges Danton, resulted in over 40,000 people being executed or dying in prison. Robespierre's chilling justification, terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible, offers a stark glimpse into the mindset that fueled this period of extreme violence. Join us as we delve into the heart of the French Revolution's reign of terror, unraveling the tragic tale of the Princess of Lamballe, a victim of political turmoil and a symbol of the Revolution's merciless wrath. Welcome to the Diary of Julius Caesar. A tapestry of loyalty and tragedy, the enigmatic life of Princess de Lamballe. In the opulent yet turbulent tapestry of 18th century French aristocracy, few figures evoke a blend of intrigue and tragedy, quite like Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise of Savoy-Carignan, better known as the Princess de Lamballe. Born into the House of Savoy in Turin, Italy, on September 8, 1749, she was the daughter of Prince Louis Victor of Savoy-Carignan and his consort, Christine Henriette of Hesse-Rheinfels-Rottenburg. Thrust into the volatile world of French nobility through her marriage at the age of 17 to Louis Alexandre de Bourbon, Prince de Lamballe, heir to one of the richest fortunes in France, her life was a canvas of stark contrasts. The opulence of her early life was marked by the grandeur of the Piedmontese court, where she was surrounded by the finest tutors, artists, and musicians of the era. However, the early loss of her husband in 1768, barely a year into their marriage, left her a young widow at 19. This personal tragedy led to her deep melancholy, a stark contrast to the glittering world she inhabited. But it was this twist of fate that led her to the French court at Versailles, where she would meet Queen Marie Antoinette. The Queen, captivated by Lamballe's ethereal beauty and grace, forged a deep and lasting friendship with her, which would eventually lead to Lamballe's appointment as superintendent of the Queen's household in 1775. This role was not just a title, it was a testament to the intimate bond they shared, a rarity in the often superficial circles of the royal court. The friendship between Lamballe and Marie Antoinette was a beacon of constancy in the tumultuous life of the Queen. As the political climate in France grew increasingly volatile, their relationship remained steadfast. Lamballe was often the mediator between the Queen and her critics at court, employing her diplomatic skills to navigate the treacherous waters of palace intrigue. Their bond was further solidified in 1785 during the infamous Affair of the Diamond Necklace, where Lamballe provided unwavering support to the Queen amidst the scandal that rocked the monarchy. Despite the brewing storm of the French Revolution, the Princess de Lamballe's loyalty to Marie Antoinette and the monarchy remained unshaken. As the Bastille fell in 1789 and the revolution gained momentum, Lamballe was one of the few courtiers who stayed close to the royal family. Her commitment was such that, even after the royal family was transferred from Versailles to the Tuileries Palace in Paris, she chose to return from England, where she had briefly sought refuge, to stand by the Queen's side. However, this loyalty would lead to her tragic end. After the storming of the Tuileries Palace on August 10, 1792, Lamballe was imprisoned in the La Force prison. On September 3, 1792, she met a horrific fate at the hands of a revolutionary mob, becoming one of the most notable victims of the September massacres. Her brutal murder, where her head was paraded on a pike through the streets of Paris, symbolized the ferociousness of the revolution and the deep-seated hatred for the monarchy and its supporters. A tale of two worlds, daily life in revolutionary France. The era of the French Revolution was a time of stark contrasts, marked by the lavish lives of the nobility versus the stark existence of commoners. The Princess de Lamballe, born into the House of Savoy and married into French nobility, lived a life steeped in luxury. At the opulent court of Versailles, where extravagance was the norm, she was a part of an elite that enjoyed grand balls, sumptuous feasts, and high fashion. For instance, the infamous diamond necklace affair involving Marie Antoinette highlighted the extravagant and often reckless spending of the nobility. Versailles itself, with over 700 rooms, 2,000 windows, and 1,250 chimneys, was a symbol of this excess. In sharp contrast, the common French populace faced dire economic hardships. The average laborer's daily wage was about 30 sous, while a loaf of bread could cost up to 15 sous, consuming half of their daily earnings. The rural peasantry, constituting about 80% of the population, labored under feudal obligations and heavy taxation, with little to no political representation. Urban workers in Paris lived in cramped, unsanitary quarters, often several families sharing a single room. The phrase, "let them eat cake," apocryphally attributed to Marie Antoinette, became emblematic of the nobility's disconnect from the struggles of the common people. While the Princess de Lamballe engaged in court intrigues and enjoyed the privileges of nobility, the Third Estate, representing commoners, grew increasingly discontented. The convening of the Estates General in 1789, for the first time since 1614, was a response to France's financial crisis. It became a platform for airing the grievances of the Third Estate, leading to the pivotal tennis court oath and the eventual formation of the National Assembly. The outbreak of the Revolution marked a drastic change in the lives of the nobility. The storming of the Bastille, a fortress and prison in Paris, on July 14, 1789, became a symbol of the revolution and the downfall of the aristocracy. Many nobles fled France in what was known as the First Emigration, while others, like the Princess de Lamballe, remained and faced the revolution's wrath. Her murder during the September massacres of 1792, where over 1,000 prisoners were killed, was a testament to the revolution's violent retribution against the aristocracy. For the common people, the revolution was a beacon of hope, but also a source of upheaval. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, proclaimed in August 1789, promised liberty, equality, and fraternity. Yet the reality was tumultuous, with periods like the Reign of Terror, 1793, under Robespierre bringing new forms of oppression and bloodshed. Whispers in the Hall of Mirrors, Princess de Lamballe and the Court of Versailles. In the grand and gilded halls of Versailles, where intrigue whispered through the corridors like a hidden breeze, Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise of Savoy-Carignan, the Princess de Lamballe, stood as a pivotal figure in Marie Antoinette's inner circle. Her appointment in 1775 as the superintendent of the Queen's household, a position that had remained vacant since the departure of the Duchess de Noailles, was not just a court appointment. It was a testament to the trust and friendship in a court where duplicity was often the norm. The role, steeped in history and prestige, had her overseeing the daily operations of the Queen's chambers and managing her personal affairs, a responsibility akin to navigating a ship in stormy waters. At Versailles, a place where the son King Louis XIV once walked, the atmosphere was a dazzling display of power, and opulence. The superintendent of the Queen's household was a role wrapped in luxury and power, overseeing a staff of hundreds, from ladies-in-waiting to chambermaids, each with their own role in the elaborate ballet of court life. For Lamballe, this meant holding a position that was both envied and scrutinized. Her influence was felt in every corner of the Queen's life, from the fabrics chosen for dresses to the guest lists for private soirees. Lamballe's presence at the court was marked by a balance of grace and influence. Renowned for her beauty, with contemporary accounts describing her as a figure of elegance and serenity, she stood apart in a court where appearances were paramount. Her relationship with Marie Antoinette was a complex dance of personal affection and political alliance. The Queen, often the subject of public scrutiny and maligned by factions within the court, found in Lamballe not just a friend, but a bastion of support. Their bond was a rare beacon of constancy in the ever-changing landscape of Versailles, where loyalty was often fleeting. Versailles was a universe unto itself, a world where every gesture and word carried weight. Lamballe's multifaceted role as a companion, advisor, and arbiter of the Queen's favor placed her at the heart of court politics. She was a hostess of salons and gatherings where the elite of Paris discussed the issues of the day, her rooms a microcosm of the larger world outside the palace walls. In these gatherings, the fate of France was whispered over cups of tea and under the glow of candlelight. However, her position at the heart of the royal circle was not without its perils. The lavish lifestyle of Versailles was often a target of public criticism, and the extravagant spending habits of the Queen were a constant source of controversy. Lamballe, by virtue of her proximity to Marie Antoinette, found herself entangled in the web of public scrutiny. Her unwavering loyalty, even as the storm clouds of revolution gathered, marked her as a symbol of the ancient regime and a target for the burgeoning resentment against the monarchy. The Gathering Storm, Prelude to the French Revolution. In the years leading up to the French Revolution, France was a nation on the brink. The political climate was a volatile mix of outdated traditions and burgeoning Enlightenment ideals, and the social fabric was frayed by inequality and discontent. The financial situation, dire and deteriorating, was the spark that would ignite the flames of revolution. The roots of the crisis lay deep in the soil of French history. The monarchy, under Louis XVI, was the epitome of absolute power, but it was a power built on shaky foundations. The king's authority was unquestioned, but his decisions, often influenced by a court detached from the reality of common life, were leading the nation toward disaster. The lavish spending of the royal court, including the extravagant expenditures of Marie Antoinette, was a source of public ire. Meanwhile, France's involvement in the American Revolution from 1775 to 1783 added to an already burdensome national debt, estimated to be about 1.3 billion livres by the end of the war. The social structure of France was equally problematic. The Ancien Regime's societal order was divided into three estates: the clergy, First Estate, the nobility, Second Estate, and the common people, Third Estate. The First and Second Estates enjoyed numerous privileges, including exemptions from many taxes, which further burdened the Third Estate. By the late 1780s, the disparity between the wealthy and the poor was stark and growing ever more so. Economic distress exacerbated the situation. Poor harvests in 1788 led to food shortages and skyrocketing bread prices. In a society where bread was the staple diet, this was catastrophic. The famous phrase, "Qu'ils mangent de la brioche," let them eat cake, apocryphally attributed to Marie Antoinette, encapsulates the disconnect between the ruling class and the suffering populace. Amidst this turmoil, the Estates General was convened in May 1789 for the first time since 1614. This assembly, bringing together representatives from all three estates, was intended to address the financial crisis. However, it quickly became a battleground for deeper issues. The Third Estate, representing around 98% of the population, was allotted the same number of delegates as each of the other two estates, a clear misrepresentation of the population distribution. This inequity led to the pivotal moment on June 17, 1789, when the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly, a move towards a more representative form of governance. The storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, is often marked as the beginning of the French Revolution, but the seeds were sown much earlier. The economic mismanagement, social inequality, and political rigidity of the Ancien Regime created a powder keg waiting for a spark. The Estates General of 1789 was that spark, igniting a revolution that would sweep away the old order and reshape not only France, but the entire world. Bastille Day, the catalyst of change in revolutionary France. July 14, 1789, remains etched in history as the day the Bastille fell, a day that symbolized the crumbling of an ancient regime and the rise of a new era in France. The storming of the Bastille, a fortress prison in Paris, became the emblem of the French Revolution, a symbol of the people's triumph over despotism. The Bastille, originally built to defend the eastern approach to the city from the English during the 100 Years' War, had evolved into a state prison by the 17th century. Its dark, foreboding walls housed a mere 7 prisoners on the day of the attack, but its significance lay far beyond its physical confines. It stood as a potent symbol of the tyranny of the Bourbon monarchy, representing the suppression of freedom and the arbitrariness of royal power. Tensions had been mounting in Paris in the summer of 1789. Economic hardship, fueled by a severe winter that caused widespread crop failures and a resultant spike in bread prices, had inflamed public unrest. The political deadlock of the Estates General and the dismissal of Jacques Necker, the finance minister who was seen as sympathetic to the Third Estate, further aggravated the situation. The assault on the Bastille was sparked by both desperation and defiance. On the morning of July 14th, crowds had already gathered around the fortress, spurred by rumors that royal troops would be used to disband the newly formed National Assembly. The demand for arms and the release of prisoners held in the Bastille was about more than just ammunition. It was symbolic of the people's quest for liberty and justice. The attack began around mid-morning and lasted until the late afternoon. The defenders, a garrison of around 114 soldiers, were vastly outnumbered by the attacking force of nearly 1,000 insurgents. After hours of confrontation and negotiations failing, the attackers stormed the fortress. The fall of the Bastille, marked by the governor of the prison, Marquis Bernard-René de Launay, being dragged through the streets and murdered, his head paraded around the city on a pike, was a stark display of the people's wrath. The impact of the Bastille's fall on the French royalty, including figures like Princess de Lamballe, was immediate and profound. King Louis XVI, upon hearing of the event, famously asked, "Is it a revolt?" Only to be told, "No, sire, it's a revolution." This marked a crucial turning point in his reign, a realization that the traditional order of monarchy and aristocracy was no longer tenable. For the Princess de Lamballe, a close confidant and friend of Queen Marie Antoinette, the storming of the Bastille was a harbinger of personal tragedy. As superintendent of the Queen's household, she was intimately tied to the fate of the royal family. The fall of the Bastille not only signaled a drastic shift in the political landscape, but also heralded the violent upheavals that would follow, culminating in the September massacres of 1792, where she would meet her brutal end. The storming of the Bastille became a defining moment in the French Revolution, a rallying point that symbolized the end of absolute monarchy and the birth of the people's sovereignty. It was not just the physical liberation of a prison, but the breaking of chains that had long bound the French populace. The event's impact rippled through the highest echelons of royalty, signaling the irreversible shift of power from the monarch to the masses. The tide of petticoats, the Women's March that shook Versailles. The Women's March on Versailles on October 5, 1789, was not just a protest, it was a seismic event in the French Revolution that underscored the formidable influence of women in the movement. This march began as a cry for bread in the markets of Paris, but quickly evolved into a revolutionary act that would change the course of French history. France in 1789 was a cauldron of discontent. The general populace was reeling under the twin pressures of economic hardship and political disenfranchisement. A series of poor harvests had led to a shortage of bread, the staple of the French diet, causing its price to skyrocket. In this climate, a rumor about a lavish banquet at the Versailles court, where the royal family allegedly trampled the nation's colours, stirred the already simmering anger of the Parisians. This rumor, although later proven to be exaggerated, was the spark that ignited the powder keg of public fury. On the morning of October 5th, a group of market women gathered at the markets of Paris, initially to demand bread. As they rallied, their numbers swelled, and soon thousands were marching towards Versailles, about 12 miles away. The group grew to include not just women but also men, including National Guardsmen led by the Marquis de Lafayette. As they marched, the crowd swelled, reaching around 7,000 women. The women, armed with whatever they could find, kitchen knives, laundry tools, and pikes, were a formidable force, driven by desperation and a sense of injustice. Upon their arrival at Versailles, the scene was chaotic. The women, undeterred by the royal guards, insisted on seeing the king. Louis XVI, taken aback by the fervour and size of the crowd, agreed to meet with representatives of the women. This encounter, fraught with tension, resulted in a momentous decision. The king agreed to distribute all the bread in Versailles to the crowd and, more significantly, to return with his family to Paris. The return of the king and queen to Paris on October 6, 1789, was a turning point. The royal family, once ensconced in the opulent isolation of Versailles, was now in the heart of Paris at the Tuileries Palace. This move signalled a shift in power dynamics, effectively transforming the king into a prisoner of his own people and placing him at the mercy of the revolutionary forces. This historic march is a vivid example of the power of collective action and a reminder of the often overlooked role of women in shaping history. The women of Paris on that October day did not just march for bread. They marched for justice, equality, and a say in the governance of their country, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of the French Revolution. Twilight of a dynasty, the waning years of the French monarchy, the decline of the French monarchy, a saga unfolding over decades leading up to and during the French Revolution, marked the gradual disintegration of centuries-old royal power. The reign of Louis XVI, which began in 1774, inherited the burdens of his predecessor's extravagances. The cost of France's involvement in the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution significantly strained the royal treasury. By the time Louis XVI ascended the throne, the national debt was a staggering 3.315 billion livres, a figure that dwarfed the state's annual income. Louis XVI's rule was characterized by a series of financial missteps and a lack of decisive leadership. His well-intentioned but ultimately unsuccessful reforms, like the proposed taxation of the nobility and clergy, were met with fierce opposition. This resistance led to the convening of the Estates General in May 1789 for the first time since 1614. Initially meant to address the financial crisis, the meeting opened Pandora's box, igniting revolutionary sentiments and challenging the monarchy's authority. The transformation of the Estates General into the National Assembly signalled a seismic shift in power dynamics. This was further exemplified by the storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, a date now celebrated as Bastille Day. Although only 7 prisoners were held in the Bastille at the time, its fall symbolized the crumbling of royal authority and the rise of popular power. Events like the Women's March on Versailles in October 1789, which resulted in the king and queen being brought from the isolated luxury of Versailles to Paris, further illustrated the monarchy's declining control. The monarchy's dwindling power was starkly highlighted by the flight to Varennes on June 20, 1791. The royal family's attempt to flee France, a plan betrayed and foiled, marked a point of no return. The image of the king, disguised in a servant's attire and arrested in Varennes, shattered any remaining semblance of his divine right and authority. The rise of radical groups like the Jacobins, led by figures like Maximilien Robespierre and the sans-culottes, the militant working-class Parisians, shifted the revolution towards more radical outcomes. These groups' ascendancy culminated in the declaration of the First French Republic on September 21, 1792, effectively ending the monarchy. For royalists and loyalists, the changing tides were disastrous. Nobles and royal sympathizers faced widespread persecution, with many fleeing abroad in what was known as the émigré movement. The most prominent victims of this seismic political shift were King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, both executed in 1793, their deaths symbolizing the definitive end of Bourbon rule in France. A royal misstep, the ill-fated flight to Varennes. In the annals of the French Revolution, few episodes capture the desperation and drama of the period quite like the flight to Varennes. This ill-fated escape attempt by King Louis XVI and his family in June 1791 not only marked a turning point in the revolution, but also dramatically altered the fate of the French monarchy. By 1791, the French monarchy was teetering on the brink. The revolution had drastically altered the political landscape, and King Louis XVI, under increasing pressure, felt trapped and powerless in Paris. The radicalization of the revolution, along with the growing influence of clubs like the Jacobins and the Cordeliers, made the royal family's position increasingly precarious. Against this backdrop, the plan for the escape, known as the flight to Varennes, was conceived. The escape plan, orchestrated with the help of several royalist sympathizers, was to flee the Tuileries Palace in Paris and seek refuge in the royalist stronghold of Montmédy, near the northeastern border of France. On the night of June 20, 1791, the royal family, disguised as servants, slipped out of Paris in a heavy coach. This vehicle, chosen for its capacity to carry the family and their attendants, was ironically conspicuous and would contribute to their undoing. The journey was fraught with miscalculations and delays. The royal family, traveling under the alias of the Corsac family, was recognized several times along the route. The most fateful recognition came at Saint-Ménéhould, where a postmaster named Jean-Baptiste Drouet, who had served in the King's Guards, identified Louis XVI from his likeness on a currency note. Drouet then raced ahead to Varennes, where he and the local authorities apprehended the royal party on the evening of June 21st. The capture of the royal family in Varennes, a small town in northeastern France, was a moment of high drama. News of their arrest spread rapidly, sending shockwaves across the nation. The royal family was escorted back to Paris in a journey marked by public humiliation. Crowds lined the streets, not to cheer their monarch, but to gaze upon a fallen king. The consequences of the flight to Varennes were profound and far-reaching. The failed escape attempt severely damaged the king's credibility and legitimacy. It exposed his lack of commitment to the constitutional monarchy, which he had previously sworn to uphold, and led many to accuse him of treason against his own state. This event hardened public opinion against the monarchy and gave the revolutionaries, particularly the more radical factions, a significant boost. For the royalist supporters, the flight to Varennes was a devastating blow. It weakened their position and made their cause synonymous with treachery in the eyes of the revolutionaries. The incident led to increased surveillance and persecution of suspected royalists, further polarizing the already divided French society. Shadows of change, the radical pulse of the French Revolution. During the tumultuous years of the French Revolution, the rise of radical groups like the Jacobins and the sans-culottes marked a significant shift in the revolutionary narrative. The Jacobins, emerging from the larger society of the Friends of the Constitution, rapidly evolved from a group advocating constitutional monarchy to the standard-bearers of radical republicanism. Founded in the Dominican convent in the Rue Saint-Honoré, Paris, in 1789, the Jacobins included luminaries like Maximilien Robespierre, Georges Danton, and Jean-Paul Marat, figures who would later be central to the Reign of Terror. Under Robespierre's leadership, the Jacobins steered the revolution into its most extreme and bloody phase between 1793 and 1794. This period, known as the Reign of Terror, was characterized by the harsh suppression of perceived counter-revolutionary activities. The Revolutionary Tribunal, established by the Jacobins, oversaw the execution of thousands, including King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. Robespierre's infamous justification, "Terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible," became a chilling embodiment of their rule. The sans-culottes, representing the militant working-class Parisians, were a more amorphous and decentralized force. Their name, meaning "without breeches," symbolized their rejection of the aristocratic dress code. They were pivotal in key events like the storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, and the Women's March on Versailles. The sans-culottes were driven by demands for direct democracy and economic reforms, including price controls on bread, a vital staple for the poor, which had seen its price skyrocket due to poor harvests and economic mismanagement. The relationship between the Jacobins and the sans-culottes was complex and symbiotic. While the Jacobins provided ideological direction and political voice, the sans-culottes were the muscle, enforcing the radical policies on the streets. This partnership was evident in the insurrection of August 10, 1792, which led to the fall of the monarchy and the establishment of the First French Republic. The influence of these radical groups dramatically altered the course of the French Revolution. The Jacobins, through the Committee of Public Safety, and the sans-culottes, through their grassroots activism, pushed the revolution towards radical reforms, reshaping the French societal and political landscape. The Reign of Terror, though brutal, was a testament to their unwavering commitment to their revolutionary ideals. September 1792, a dark chapter in revolutionary Paris. The French Revolution's tumultuous narrative reached a peak of brutality with the September massacres of 1792. Over just a few days, from September 2nd to the 6th, the streets of Paris were stained with the blood of over 1,000 prisoners, marking one of the most harrowing episodes of the revolution. This wave of killings, driven by a blend of fear, paranoia, and revolutionary zeal, left an indelible mark on the history of the revolution. The seeds of this violence were sown in a climate of war and internal strife. France, newly declared a republic on September 21, 1792, was embroiled in conflict with Austria and Prussia. The political atmosphere was charged with tension after the storming of the Tuileries Palace on August 10th, which led to the imprisonment of King Louis XVI and his family. The growing fear of a royalist uprising within Paris, coupled with the Duke of Brunswick's manifesto threatening retaliation if the royal family was harmed, created a volatile mixture of fear and anger among the revolutionaries. The September massacres commenced at the Abbaye prison and rapidly spread to other prisons like La Force, the Carmes, and Saint-Firmin. The victims, ranging from suspected royalist sympathizers and clergy to common criminals, were often given hasty makeshift trials by makeshift tribunals, if any at all, before being brutally killed. Estimates of the death toll range from 1,100 to 1,400, a chilling testament to the scale of the violence. The perpetrators were a mixed group, including radical sans-culottes, members of the National Guard, and even ordinary Parisians caught up in the fervor. The killings were indiscriminate and barbaric, with many victims brutally murdered in the prisons or dragged out into the streets. The massacre at the Carmes prison, where over 100 priests and clergy were killed, was particularly gruesome. Among the notable victims was Princess de Lamballe, a close friend of Queen Marie Antoinette. Imprisoned at La Force, she was a target not for her political actions, but for her association with the monarchy and her aristocratic background. Her death, characterized by its brutality, became emblematic of the savagery of the September massacres. The impact of the September massacres on the French Revolution was profound. The scale and brutality of the killings shocked both supporters and detractors of the revolution. The events signaled a shift towards more radical and violent measures against perceived enemies of the revolution and set the stage for the reign of terror that would follow. Tragedy at the dawn of terror, the fate of Princess de Lamballe, the gruesome murder of Princess de Lamballe, Marie Thérèse Louise of Savoy-Carignan, on September 3, 1792, during the September massacres, stands out as one of the most brutal episodes of the French Revolution. Born into the House of Savoy on September 8, 1749, in Turin, Italy, the princess was married off to Louis Alexandre de Bourbon, Prince de Lamballe, at the age of 17. Widowed just a year later, she became a significant figure at the court of Versailles, celebrated for her beauty and her intimate friendship with Queen Marie Antoinette. Her role as the superintendent of the Queen's household, conferred in 1775, made her a prominent but controversial figure, drawing the ire of those who opposed the monarchy. The summer of 1792 was a critical period in the Revolution. The storming of the Tuileries Palace on August 10th and the subsequent imprisonment of the royal family heightened tensions across Paris. As a close associate of Marie Antoinette, Princess de Lamballe became a target for the revolutionaries' rage against the monarchy. Imprisoned in the La Force prison, she was among the aristocrats and royalists caught in the revolutionary fervor that swept the city. During the September massacres, revolutionary mobs, driven by fear of counter-revolutionary plots and seeking retribution against the monarchy, targeted prisons across Paris. The Princess de Lamballe, already vulnerable due to her close ties with the royal family, found herself in the midst of this chaos. On the morning of September 3rd, she was forcibly taken from her cell and subjected to a mock trial by a hastily assembled revolutionary tribunal. Despite her pleas for mercy, she was declared guilty of crimes against the French people. The events that followed were a gruesome display of mob justice. The princess was taken to the streets of Paris, where she was met with a hostile and frenzied crowd. The exact details of her murder are a subject of historical debate, but accounts agree on its brutality. She was savagely beaten and mutilated, her body desecrated in a way that shocked even contemporary observers. The motivations for her murder were deeply rooted in the revolutionary sentiment that was sweeping across France. Princess de Lamballe represented everything the revolutionaries detested: aristocracy, privilege, and close association with the despised Queen Marie Antoinette. Her killing was a manifestation of the revolution's darkest impulses, a symbol of the radical change that had engulfed France. The aftermath of the princess's murder was chilling. Revolutionaries paraded her severed head on a pike through the streets, displaying it before the windows of the imprisoned Marie Antoinette in a grotesque act of psychological torture. This act of extreme violence was intended to instill fear among the monarchy's supporters and serve as a stark symbol of the revolution's power and its willingness to exact brutal revenge on its enemies. The death of Princess de Lamballe was a watershed moment in the French Revolution, marking the transition to the Reign of Terror. It exemplified the violent extremes to which the revolution had escalated, a far cry from its early ideals of liberty and equality. The princess's tragic end became a symbol of the revolution's capacity for brutality and the perils of unchecked political fervor. For Queen Marie Antoinette, the loss of her dear friend and confidant was a devastating blow, further isolating her in her imprisonment and despair. The brutality of the princess's death underscored the dangerous and volatile environment the Queen was in and foreshadowed the grim fate that awaited her. The guillotine's shadow, the Reign of Terror, and the fall of nobility. The Reign of Terror, a grim chapter in French history, lasted from September 5, 1793 to July 28, 1794. Under the guidance of Maximilien Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, it represented a period of extreme political and social upheaval, marked by widespread violence and the systematic targeting of perceived enemies of the revolution. This era saw the revolutionary government take drastic measures to crush opposition and consolidate power, resulting in an estimated 17,000 official executions, though the actual number, including extrajudicial killings and deaths in prison, could be much higher. Robespierre, a figure synonymous with the Terror, wielded the revolutionary tribunal as a tool of political repression. The guillotine, a device intended to democratize executions, became the symbol of this era, delivering swift and often arbitrary justice. The fear and suspicion fostered by the tribunal permeated every stratum of society. The nobility, in particular, found themselves relentlessly pursued as enemies of the state. High-profile executions, such as that of King Louis XVI on January 21, 1793, and Queen Marie Antoinette on October 16, 1793, underscored the severity of the situation. Their deaths not only symbolized the fall of the Bourbon monarchy, but also marked the decimation of the French aristocracy. The terror's impact on those connected to the monarchy was devastating. The mere suspicion of loyalty to the crown could result in arrest and execution. This period saw the erasure of centuries-old noble lineages and a dramatic shift in the social hierarchy. Notable aristocrats, such as the Duke of Orléans, Louis-Philippe II, who initially supported the revolution and even voted for the king's execution, were not spared and met their end at the guillotine. The relentless pursuit of royalists and nobles led to a significant emigration of these classes, resulting in a brain drain that affected various aspects of French cultural and political life. Robespierre's regime, initially embraced for its revolutionary zeal, eventually spiraled into a cycle of paranoia and bloodshed. The introduction of the cult of the supreme being in 1794, Robespierre's attempt to replace Catholicism with a state-sponsored deist religion, further alienated many of his supporters. The Festival of the Supreme Being, held on June 8, 1794, intended as a display of unity and strength, instead highlighted Robespierre's growing disconnect from the populace and the revolutionary ideals. The Thermidorian reaction, the backlash against Robespierre and his policies, was swift and decisive. On July 27, 1794, 9 Thermidor Year II, Robespierre and his close associates were arrested. In a twist of fate, they were executed the following day at the Place de la Révolution, without trial, using the same guillotine that had claimed so many during the Terror. The Reign of Terror fundamentally altered the French societal landscape. The decimation of the nobility and the reallocation of their wealth and properties marked a significant redistribution of power and resources. This period also set a historical precedent for the lengths to which a government might go in the name of ideology, a lesson that resonates in discussions of political power and human rights. Whispers from the Guillotine, myths and legends of the French Revolution. The French Revolution, a crucible of significant historical events, has been encased in a myriad of myths and legends, particularly regarding key figures such as Marie Antoinette and the Princess de Lamballe. These embellished stories have shaped our understanding and memory of the era, often distorting the lines between fact and fiction. The most infamous myth is attributed to Marie Antoinette. The phrase, "let them eat cake," allegedly uttered in response to hearing that the peasants had no bread, is ingrained in popular history. However, historians agree that there is no evidence she ever said this. Jean-Jacques Rousseau mentioned a great princess, uttering these words in his Confessions, but the book was written when Marie Antoinette was only a child. This misattribution reflects the perception of the monarchy's detachment from the struggles of the common people, a narrative that fueled revolutionary fervor. Princess de Lamballe, a close friend of Marie Antoinette, suffered a gruesome death at the hands of a mob in September 1792. Tales of her murder are often laden with dramatized horror. For instance, some accounts suggest her head was paraded on a pike through Paris, a detail that remains contested among historians. Her fate, though undeniably tragic, is sometimes enveloped in a sensationalism that overshadows her role in the court and her relationship with the Queen. King Louis XVI's execution is another event shrouded in myth. While some accounts portray him as facing his death with stoic dignity, others suggest he was overwhelmed with fear. His purported last words, "I die innocent of all the crimes laid to my charge. I pardon those who have occasioned my death, and I pray to God that the blood you are going to shed may never be visited on France," are often cited to depict his state of mind, though the accuracy of these words is debated. The guillotine, the revolution's symbol of swift justice, is surrounded by hyperbole. While it was a tool for mass execution during the Reign of Terror, the number of its victims is sometimes inflated in popular narratives. Historical records suggest approximately 17,000 people were executed by the guillotine during this period, a figure less sensational but no less tragic. Maximilien Robespierre, often villainized as the mastermind of the Reign of Terror, is a complex figure with many myths surrounding him. Initially, an advocate against the death penalty and for democratic ideals, his later role in the Reign of Terror has overshadowed his earlier political stances. His own execution on July 28, 1794, often seen as a poetic end to the Terror, adds to the narrative complexity surrounding his character. The storming of the Bastille, a symbol of the Revolution's beginning, is another event enveloped in myth. It is often dramatized as a heroic assault by a large, organized mob against a heavily fortified prison. In reality, the Bastille held only 7 prisoners at the time, and the fortress was not as formidable as depicted in popular lore. The legend of the treacherouses, the knitting women of the Revolution, who supposedly sat by the guillotine and celebrated each execution, adds a macabre touch to the narrative. While women were present during executions, their motivations were likely varied, ranging from political support to mere curiosity. This legend, however, has been used to depict the macabre fascination with the guillotine's work. As we close the pages on our exploration of the Princess of Lamballe and the tumultuous saga of the French Revolution, we are reminded of the profound words of Maximilien Robespierre: "The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant." This journey through history has not only unraveled the life and tragic end of a royal figure caught in the whirlwind of change, but also shed light on a revolution that reshaped not just France, but the ideals of societies worldwide. From the opulent halls of Versailles, where Princess de Lamballe once graced the court with her elegance, to the dark streets of Paris, echoing with the cries of liberté, égalité, fraternité, the French Revolution remains a testament to the power of the human spirit in seeking justice and equality. It was an era that witnessed the fall of kings and the rise of the common man, an epoch where the guillotine's shadow loomed large, yet the flame of freedom burned ever brighter. As we bid adieu to this chapter in history, let's carry forward its lessons, ensuring that the echoes of the past continue to enlighten our path towards a more equitable world.